Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Feather and Fur. Your host, Brad Hurlebus.
Dave Palmer.
Yeah, buddy. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, it's going to be good. It's
What?
I always like the informative ones, right?
Right.
So,
And I mean, it's part 2 of a series, so that's pretty cool.
yeah. Yeah.
How far the series is going to go, I don't know yet. 3 for sure. 3. I've got the third one in for sure. So,
I like how we're getting guests that have a lot of information to give, and we're getting that information out there.
I
That's
agree.
yeah.
I agree. So let's get started because I know we're at a little bit of a hard stop, a little bit of time crunch on this one, which is all right. So we gotta go. So I want to welcome to the show Dr. RuthAnn Lobos, Senior Veterinarian at Purina.
Hey there, guys. Good to be here.
I'm excited. I really am. So I know in my email I said I was kind of doing a mini series for dogs, and we had on Dr. Claire yesterday with Paradigm, or not yesterday, but for our last episode with Paradigm Outdoors, talking about veterinary, like field care for dogs and
Sure.
for first aid kits and her experience as a veterinarian. And I know you've presented on that as well, but I wanted to talk to you about nutrition and dog food and the crazy world that it really is.
It is insane. And so if we want to go back in time, I've been a veterinarian for a hot second or a couple decades. When I started, when I went into vet school, like it was like dog food was dog food. Like you didn't even really, I had a dog in college, in vet school. Like I didn't really give a whole lot of thought to what was going in the bowl. I started, I'll save you all the details, but I started veterinary school thinking I was going to be an equine surgeon and work on racehorses. I live somewhere in like Kentucky or upstate New York. Life is funny and takes different twists and turns. And I obviously am not an equine surgeon. And really, like I went into private practice for about 2.5 years, and I had a classmate of mine who was like, hey, Purina's looking to expand, their support of veterinary schools, and they're looking for veterinarians. And do you know anybody who might be interested? I know you're probably not, and blah, blah, blah. And I had a horrible day at work, and I was like, I don't know. I might be interested. What are we talking about? And he was like, well, you'll be talking about nutrition and pet food and all of that. And fast forward a few months, interviewed, and I was like, well, the person that was interviewing me asked, he was like, how long do you think if you get this job, how long do you think you would be in the industry? And I was like, maybe 3 to 5 years. And in the back of my head, I'm like, I mean, how exciting can pet food really be? And I obviously wasn't going to tell him that at the time. And so they wound up offering me the job. I took the job, and I mean, for the last almost 19 years, I have just like, one, found my passion, and two, been in this industry that is growing and exploding and discovering with new research that really can impact how our dogs live, how we live with them, how long they can live. I mean, it is just really fascinating, the unlock that nutrition can bring for us and for our dogs, more importantly.
Yeah, and you touched on something there at the start. Like I've heard of all this nutrition talk, and I can remember as a kid, like you'd be going to the chicken feed store to get the bird feed, and you just be like, oh yeah, we need a bag of dog food, and you just grab it there. But now you go into a pet store, and it's like there's all this selection and all this different stuff, and it's like old age dog and performance dog, and there's numbers on the bags now, and it's not just like a round brown thing that you put in the dog's bowl. So
Right. And I mean, a lot of it is, so some of it has been from the science and research, and we'll touch on that in just a second. And then some of it has also been like how dogs are in our lives, right? Like they used to be in the majority of our country, and I would argue the majority of the world, they would be in the backyard or maybe roaming free, and not necessarily, in the house with us. And now they've moved from the backyard into the house, sometimes into the bed with us. Sometimes, I live out here in Colorado, and there are times where like I'm walking down the street and I have to look in the stroller that's being pushed to see if it's a dog or if it's a baby. Like there's a 50-50 shot, right? So our relationship with our dogs has changed, which has also then changed the focus on like, okay, if I'm treating them, like they are a family member of mine, so many people call their dogs their four-legged kids, right? So then you're going to start to look at their food differently in a sense, almost like how you would look at a food to feed, a human that's in your family or your life. So that has certainly opened the door for a lot of these like niche formulas coming in. And then it's also been a lot of research, right, that has really helped to discover how different nutrients and different ingredients can really benefit the dog based on their metabolism. So it's been an interesting wild ride that I've again, it was one of those where I had no idea that when I said yes to that interview back in 2005, that I would be, sitting here today talking with, folks about the importance of nutrition for their outdoor sporting dog and all of that. It's just been so fun.
Yeah. And you never see like my dog got a little bit thick there last year when she got injured, and you go to the vet and they just say like, don't feed as much for a while and that'll help them lose weight. You don't see any of this like, yeah, cut the carbs out and put her on the Atkins or any of that stuff. So
Yeah. And it's, and then you will see, you can this might make me sound like a total nerd, but like you can spend a lot of time on Dr. Google going down deep rabbit holes if you put in there like best food for dogs, and you will get all kinds of information out there. And really, besides working for Purina and doing things like this, I'm in a practice a couple of days a month. I like to call it being a real veterinarian. So I want to make sure I put hands on dogs and talk to clients and stay current and all of that. And I do get this question a lot of like, how do I know what is a good pet food? And there are two pieces of information that people should look for. First and foremost, is a phone number on the back of the bag. And people are like, really? That's what you tell people to look for? And it is so important because it's not required by law for the pet food manufacturer to have a phone number. You need a physical address, and that is it, where the pet food is made by, the home address for the company. But if you have a question or your dog is eating this food and suddenly gets sick and you want to talk to somebody and say, hey, is there something wrong with your product? Like if they don't have a phone number, then you've got to like send a letter or, hope that they have a website or something like that versus being able to talk to, a live individual on the other end and have your questions answered. And that's what I encourage, owners a lot is like, if you're in that aisle, you're like looking at this bag, it talks about all the wonderful things that it's going to be your dog will do if they eat this food. Look and see if there's a number there, and then take that extra step and actually call it and see if there's somebody on the other end of the line who can answer, either your questions or, some of the things that I talk to owners about, asking that pet food company is, who formulates your food? Do you have veterinarians on staff? Do you have veterinary nutritionists on staff who know like the finer nuances of what dogs need? Because they're different from us. They're different from wolves. And so really you need those scientists and those researchers behind the company putting that kibble together or that wet food, in the can that you're going to feed your dog to make sure that they're getting that complete and balanced nutrition. The other thing that's on there on the back of that bag or that can is going to be what's called the AAFCO statement. So that's the American Association of Feed Control Officials, and they're the ones who set the guidelines on what, dogs and cats need in their food. I know we're focusing on dogs, but I don't want to forget about our feline friends. And so really, they set those guidelines on how much protein do they need, how much fat do they need, how much vitamin A do they need, and make sure we don't have too much in there or too little. And so you want to make sure that whatever pet food you're feeding has a phone number and then has that AFCO statement on the back of the bag that says, yes, this is appropriate for feeding, adult dogs for maintenance. And if they don't have that, pet food doesn't have those two pieces of information, I'm really, really concerned, and I would not recommend feeding that food no matter what the brand is.
That's good information right there, because I never would have thought of that.
Yeah,
No,
go ahead.
I will say, like, I've been, like, since the last breeder with my lab, I've been feeding Purina for many years now, for probably like 15 years.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess I haven't really looked at a bag of dog food other than, like, all right, he's old. Like, he actually started to get a little bit of skin stuff. So I went to sensitive skin and stomach, and my Griff, my older elderly Griff, actually gets really flaky skin. So she was done better on that one as well. And I know there's all the different formulas, performance breed, and that's one of the Pro Plan blends that that I'm on. But I haven't even looked at the back of a bag in a long time, to be honest.
Yeah. She's saying that, and I'm going, is there a phone number on the back of the, well, obviously she's from Purina. There's got to be one on the back of our bag, but like, yeah.
Yes. Thankfully there is for Purina. And if you pick up the phone, you will talk to a live human being on the other end, which is good. As long, if I'm recommending it, I got to make sure my company follows those guidelines too. Right. And that's, that's another thing when we look at the pet food industry and just, the pet food aside, the pet industry in itself, right? Like, I mean, I have a 9-year-old yellow lab at home. And then, Brad, I know we talked a little bit beforehand about we are living and breathing what it's like with a Griff puppy. So Journey, my Griff puppy is 8 months old, and it's really important, I would say, to look at the heritage that's involved, right? Because as I was saying, the pet industry, so emotional. Like, I mean, for example, even though I am a veterinarian, I still can go to crazy town really quickly when something goes wrong with either Finn or Journey. Like, and maybe because I am a vet, like I automatically think, okay, whatever it is, it's a terminal disease. And like, we've got 3 days and the dog is going to be gone. And
you just spiral right down to worst case scenario.
I mean, it is amazing how fast I can get down there. And just the other day, Finn was coughing, and it sounded horrible. And I instantaneously was like, he has a tumor on his heart that's bleeding into his lungs and he's going to die. And so I did at 2:00 in the morning on Sunday, take him to the emergency room because I don't have access to an x-ray machine at that hour, and take him in, spend an exorbitant amount of money to find out that indeed he has kennel cough, right? So like, just need some antibiotics and we should be good. But because I am so emotionally attached, right? And he plays such a key role in my life. He is. And so, so do all of our bird dogs, right? Like they open up the outdoors for us. He is my running buddy. He is my confidant when I need to tell somebody a secret, and all of that. And so because of that emotional tie, there are businesses that can kind of latch into that, and really try to kind of exploit the emotions of people. And it's no different in the pet food industry. And so that's why it's really important to do the research behind the company that you are buying your dog food from, and making sure that that they are doing their due diligence, that they do have a quality and safety protocol in there to make sure that what they start with and at those ingredients winds up in their finished product at the level that they say that they do. And so that's why, again, looking at some of those companies that have that heritage in the industry, whether that's us at Purina, Royal Canin, that also is, makes Eukanuba. Science Diet is another one that, has been around for decades upon decades. And we all do really good research, have really good quality control. I can't tell you what happens behind the scenes at places like Science Diet and Royal Canin. They don't let me in. But I can tell you, at Purina, in a 24-hour time period, we do 100,000 quality and safety checks. So, we are laser focused on making sure that what we say is in there, and what we say isn't in there isn't, and that the food that you are going to feed your dog is going to perform for your dog.
That's a lot. Like that is a
Yeah.
lot of quality. That's a lot of quality assurance, right? Like that is wow. Is that federally regulated at all, or is that just what Purina does to ensure quality food?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So there are minimums. We are regulated. That's another kind of misperception that's out there, is that the pet food industry can say whatever they want, do whatever they want, put in whatever they want. And that's not true. We are regulated, as members of the Pet Food Institute. You have to abide by certain quality control, certain ingredient control. We also are looked at by the FDA, their Center for Veterinary Medicine. If we're going to make a claim on a bag, for example, we have a formula in the ProPlan line called Bright Mind that uses this blend of botanical oils. So think of things like coconut oil, but a special blend of that helps to improve cognition in dogs over the age of 7. So for us to be able to make that claim, we have to have the research to back it. And that's looked at by the FDA, by the USDA, all of that. So there are tight regulations around pet food. It's not as wild west as some people would think.
I mean, you hear it a lot that people are like, oh, they can do whatever they want. Like it's great to hear the confirmation on that. Like my wife works in medical devices and audit, actually. Like she works like with that when the FDA comes to town to audit them, and she does all their so like knowing how regulated medical devices are, like it's great to hear that like pet food is as well.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. It's not just willy-nilly. There are companies that can go off the rails for sure. And that's, again, why it's important to do your due diligence, look for that phone number, call the company, find out what they do, what are their quality control and quality assurance programs, and where do they make their pet food? Do they do research with their pet food? Things like that, that again will just give you insight to who's behind that kibble or can of food that you're putting in your dog's bowl.
So if I would call tomorrow day, I'm looking at switching to Purina Puppy Chow or whatever. Or it'd be that's not what I would do. It'd be the Pro Brand puppy. Anyways, I'm picky about my food. I want to make sure it's a high quality food, and I'm willing to spend extra money to make sure I'm in the upper, like that little higher level, that higher tier.
Sure, a little specialized,
right.
More specialized nutrition.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And I could ask tomorrow and be like, how much research do you put in your food between a puppy line and your regular adult dog line? And they would give me an answer, like they could talk to that or put me in touch with someone that could.
Yep, exactly.
It's impressive to be that open, to be honest, like to have like a consumer call and actually give them 30 seconds.
Yeah. And I mean, and that, I will say, like, that has been an evolution of the pet food companies. When you look at historically, like we were founded in St. Louis, back in 1894, William H. Danforth founded us. So we were a very humble, quiet, modest, at the time we were a feed company, right? We were making all kinds of feed, whether that was horse feed, cattle feed, emu feed, throw in, and then we started we actually created the first extruded kibble. So Purina created this industry back in 1957 with dog chow. But it was just like, it was the mindset of our founder that has perpetuated through. Is just like, you go out, you do the right thing, you put your head down and you do the right thing because you're supposed to do the right thing. And then, with the evolution of media, social media, all of that, where it got to a point where it's like, if you're not telling your story outwardly, someone else is going to tell it for you, and they might spin it. They might take credit for what you've done. And, they might call into question why you're not telling your story. So we really took a step change, probably about, 15 years or so ago, where we did start to really open up and really appreciate and take action upon that customer education and that customer communication that needs to happen, because we do the right thing. And we are all about, people and pets are better together, and nutrition is, that feeding moment is the one single interaction that owner and that dog are going to have at least once a day. And so if we can make that experience richer through quality nutrition, through good sound research, then, the world is literally a better place.
It's awesome. It's great to hear a company like, you think big companies and you think, well, they're going to be less responsive, right? Like that, like you can't get in touch with anyone. They're a huge company. Like they offer, like, so to hear something like that and to know like that's something, like one of the key things to look for is look in the back of your bag of food, call the number, see if they have an answer.
Yep.
Now, if you call at midnight, let's be realistic, probably not going to answer, but like call during business hours.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, I mean, and it is so important to have that conversation. And, and I think a lot of us get so focused on what's on the outside of the bag, as far as, I mean, we joke, but like, when a lot of times people will say, I don't want to be a veterinarian. I want to be a veterinarian because I don't like to talk to people. And I'm like, well, so here's the deal. Dogs and cats don't bring themselves into the clinic. That owner is coming in. So you have to talk to that owner, and so you have to be a good communicator. And the same is for the bag of food, right? Like that dog's not going into a store or, surfing online and trying to find the best food for themselves, right? It's the owner that's doing that. And so the bag does have to communicate to the owner. But it's also important to be able to kind of sort through some of the more like marketing jargon and really get down to the nitty gritty, because a lot of times people get so distracted by ingredients and something that sounds super sexy, like a superfood and steel cut oats and, organic blueberries. But it really is more important on the nutrients that those ingredients are providing. So like the protein that's actually in there, or the carbohydrate source that's actually in those oats, and the fiber that's in there that's going to help their digestive system, and the antioxidants that are in the blueberries. Like, so it's really more important about those nutrients that come rather than the ingredients themselves. And so, kind of navigating through that and understanding that our dogs, despite a lot of commercials that are out there, our dogs are actually omnivores. So that means, that they eat all things. They need protein, they need fats, they need carbs to really function as at their prime. They are not wolves, and they are not strictly carnivores that would survive on meat alone. So again, those are some things to think about when you're strolling down the aisle or scrolling through on the internet.
So we talked about the protein and the carbs and stuff, and I've seen dog foods I've seen guys that talk about having their dog on like one type of food for the off season and one type for the hunting season.
Yeah.
Number one, do you recommend that? And number two, how do you go about transitioning? Like like at start of the season, you want it transitioned, or like a couple weeks before? Like,
Yeah. Great question. And I get that one pretty frequently, especially, in the hunting world. And really, so if we look at like Finn, I'm about to lose my ear pod with y'all. Finn, my Labrador, who's 9, and Journey, who, as I said, she's about 8 months old, Griff puppy. I feed them ProPlan Sport 30/20, and that is an all life stages food. So you can feed it from puppyhood all the way, basically, you know, we talk about being cradle to grave without getting too morbid. And which means it's been through and it fits the profile of all the extra nutrients that puppies need, and is still okay for adult dogs. But what that food and the research that was done by Dr. Arlie Reynolds, who he is a veterinary nutritionist. He also is in the Hall of Fame of sled dog racers. So he knows all about the importance of nutrition for sporting dogs and athletic dogs. He was part of the team that designed the 30-20, and 30 stands for 30% protein, 20% fat. And our dogs for endurance are not like us. We need carbohydrates for endurance, right? If you're going to go run a race, or, you know, if you played sports in high school, it was always like the pasta dinner before, you know, the tournament on the weekend. And so let's load up on those carbs. Our dogs use fat for endurance. So that 20% fat in that ratio of 30-20 really sets their cells up for success. I'm going to dive back into maybe high school biology when we learned about the cells and the mitochondria that were in the cells, right? The powerhouse, maybe I'm getting too nerdy, but a lot of times people hear,
powerhouse of the cell. Come on.
The powerhouse of the cell, right?
Yeah.
Everybody remembers
That's
that.
right there. I can't say that word, theorem, the A² + B² = C².
Yeah, I mean, the Pythagorean theorem. Yeah,
exactly.
But here I am thinking of what's that Adam Sandler movie where he's the football player, the Abdullah Amblangata.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, crocodiles are angry because they have no toothbrush. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I love a good funny movie. But yeah, so you know, with that 30-20 ratio, it programs the right amount of mitochondria in their cells so that our dogs can run with the highest endurance, which who doesn't want their sporting dog being by their side, you know, in the field longer, feeling better, you know, just more energized and having the fuel that they need. It takes about 8 to 12 weeks to program their cells, their muscle cells, to grow all those extra mitochondria. And then it takes about another 8 to 12 weeks to kind of down-regulate those mitochondria. So based on the research, and we look at like the hunting season and all of that, you know, you're looking at like a 6-month time frame, right? Of the time it takes for their metabolism to ramp up and then ramp down. So really keeping them on that performance formula year round. But then in the off season, you just dial back the amount that you feed them, because, you know, we certainly don't want them getting overweight. You talked about your dog getting a little thicker when they were injured and recovering and all of that. So we know obesity shortens their lifespan. And so if we can keep them in lean body condition, you know, Purina did the research to show keeping those dogs in lean body condition extended not only their lifespan, but also their health span by a solid 15%. And who doesn't want their dogs around, you know, whether they are hunting with us or, you know, in the house with us, you know, for as long as possible. So, you know, keeping them lean, but not necessarily changing the formula, so that we keep their cells primed. So that way, when hunting season opens, you know, we can hit the ground running, knowing that that their cells are programmed to have that endurance with us out there in the field.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, especially if there's a food out there that is all life stages food that is going to provide the nutrients needed for a sporting dog. And that leads to, we talk about keeping them lean. And I know a lot of people do that based on looks, like how can you see the ribs? Can you feel the ribs? Is there a little meat there? Is there a waistline? Are there any other things you can look at to know if you're feeding the right amount?
Yeah. Great question. I would say first and foremost, have that conversation with your veterinarian. Sometimes they're a little hesitant to bring things up if the dog is heavy. I am not shy in that sense. I'm like, I have to be the advocate for the dog. They need to, you know, that owner needs to know if they need to feed less. So having that conversation, I don't have an official published study on this, but based on, you know, my over 2 decades of being a veterinarian, I have found that however much that dog weighed when they went in for their first annual vaccines. So they're about in the neighborhood of 15 to 16 months old. That weight is usually plus or minus about 5% of their ideal body weight. And so, again, this is more of over time. I've seen it again and again, that is, about that 16-month mark, 15, 16-month mark, and how much they weigh at that stage, at that checkup, is about their ideal body weight. Other kind of tricks of the trade that I'll say is, you were spot on. Like, you want to be able to put your hands down your dog's rib cage, and you should be able to feel their ribs. Some of the dogs, like the GSPs, those English pointers, you can almost like count every rib, and that's just, that's part of their genetics. They are, just little furnaces when it comes to their metabolism. And so, that's not going to be abnormal for them. Kind of a quick and dirty way is if you put your hand flat on a table, or a hard surface, and you run your fingers over the back of your hand. That's pretty much what your dog's ribs should feel like when they're in ideal body condition. You also should be able to see, they should have a nice little waistline right there behind their ribs. And then, they should have what's called an abdominal tuck. So their rib cage should be lower than their belly is. It should kind of go like a little upslope there. And putting those three things together usually indicates that they're in that ideal body condition. And
their back shouldn't look like a shelf.
It should not look like a shelf. They should not look like a log or a walking ottoman that I have sometimes seen, which breaks my heart, because it's I also kind of sometimes flip the script a little bit when I'm, talking about this. I'm like, it saves you so much money, right? Like, not only you're not feeding as much, so you're not spending as much on dog food, but then when you look at like the diseases that are associated with obesity, and like, you don't have to pay for, it's later in life that you have to pay for arthritis medication, later in life that you have to have repeat blood work done because they're on the arthritis medication, all of the things that are associated with that. And then that in itself can save your pocketbook as well as your waistline, and extend your dog's hunting career and your time out in the outdoors with them. So, I can't think of a better way to have all that happen.
And tying into part one of this, like a healthier dog with a lower body weight also helps for the actual hunting season, because there's less prone to injury, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, exactly.
You don't want your fat dog jumping out of your high up stand into the lake there, right? Or out of the boat into the water. And
from an upland perspective, especially early season when there's still temperatures, like overweight dogs are just more prone to overheating.
Yeah. Yep. That is absolutely a fact. Yep. Because it kind of, it's that fat that insulates, acts as, which is good, right? Like in late season, having some fat is not a bad thing, and but when they have that excess fat that's on their ribs, and it is just like, it's like wearing a big wool coat for them, and trying to hunt in that early season is going to zap them so much faster. And to your point, exactly, like put them at higher risk for things like heat exhaustion and, and heat stroke.
Good thing I live in Canada.
Never gets warm up there. You just have fires.
It's terribly cold, and
And then the other side of it, like towards the end of hunting season, a lot of dogs lose weight. And I think people and I've been there before. Like I've taken my dog to the vet towards like the later part of hunting season for whatever reason. They're like, you got to feed a little more. Like, your dog is kind of down on weight right now, and you don't notice. When you see your dog every day, it's hard to notice subtle changes over time. And like, now that my vet had called me out on it before, because my vet's not one to hold her tongue, she'll be like, you need to feed your dog more. Like,
love that.
She'll absolutely, like, we have a great relationship, which is amazing. But that's another, like, keep an eye on your dog's weight throughout the season as well. And if they're running hard, you might need to up that intake a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, and sometimes it happens where like it's more about like, okay, we're gonna like try to mitigate loss, like decrease the amount that we're gonna lose, and then rather than trying to put weight back on them, and then knowing, okay, when hunting season ends, that metabolism's still going to be ramped up, but we're not going to be, having that energy expenditure at the same rate. So we'll get back to good at that point. And the other thing that I will mention as we're talking about kind of getting weight on them is sometimes we do hear like, and for these like hard charging, high burning dogs, trying to feed them the volume of food that they need to have to keep that weight on can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge. And so, we recommend feeding in the evenings, and not feeding in the mornings. That can really predispose them to things like bloat, their stomachs twisting, all of that. And then for a number of reasons, can predispose them to bloat. It also, that it takes blood flow and energy and water and all of that to digest food. And if we're going to go hunt in the morning, I want their blood flow, their oxygen, all their water staying, out in their muscles and in their brains where they need that energy delivered, not in their stomachs trying to get the energy digested. And so, so that helps, as well as it's just a bit uncomfortable. And we all know, we've been there without getting too graphic with our dogs. You let them out and they are so excited, right? So and with excitement and good stress of the fun of hunting, that GI tract starts to go into overdrive. And so, why put something into their stomachs that is then going to get blasted out the backside and not, allowed to give those nutrients a chance to get into their bodies. And so really feeding at night is the way to go. A lot of times, again, for these hard charging, burning, high burning dogs, I'll recommend like feed a little after they've calmed down from the hunting and they've settled, and they're not panting like crazy and all still very wired and having a great time. Let them calm down, settle. Y'all probably talked about this on the other episode of doing a tailgate check. So do that tailgate check while they're calming down, and then feed them a portion of their kibble. Then they can have second dinner, and then you can even feed them, especially the ones who are going to need a high volume of food. You can even feed them a midnight snack or a bedtime snack. So that way they're getting those calories in, but it's not all dumped into their system all at the same time. And feeding, a bedtime snack before you're going to go hunt the next morning, they'll still have plenty of time to absorb those nutrients that in the food that you fed them.
Interesting.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Dave.
No, you talked about like feeding times. Like, we talked about this a little bit before, but like, are you a 2 feed a day kind of person or?
Yeah. So I feed once a day. It's a little bit cumbersome, but I do this to myself. Is in the off season, we feed in the mornings. During hunting season, we feed at night. I do admit, it takes a little bit, Journey, my Griff, I don't think she cares. And now I did feed her. She was fed 3 times a day as a puppy as a young puppy. At about 3 to 4 months, I changed her to twice a day. At 6 months, she's now on once a day with Finn. And I don't think she really has a preference.
3 times a day for a little one, huh?
Yeah, I did. She,
I will say my little one, she's 10 weeks and she always seems hungry. Like she really does. Like my breeder's like, we're doing twice a day. I'm like, okay, twice a day is fine. Like, but interesting to hear 3 times a day. Cause she is wildly food motivated with a crazy nose, and you can't even keep it in the mudroom with the doors closed. She will not leave the door. Like you have to have the food in the garage. Like her nose is out of control. Like for being 10 weeks old, like all I see is excitement in my eyes. The food motivation makes training so much easier, right? Like,
oh my gosh, so much easier.
And then her nose is just crazy. Like it's just, I can't believe it. So interesting to hear 3 times a day though. I might have to think about that for the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I mean, making sure, if she's gaining weight at the right rate and, you've got that great relationship with your veterinarian who will, I mean, I think that's the bonus, right? Of them having to get those several rounds of boosters, you get that hands-on, you get that opportunity to talk with them, get their weight checked, all of that, to know if she's getting the right amount of nutrients. But yeah. And so,
that
I
is
mean,
that is in the back of my head. Like, I've had a puppy
yeah,
for 17 years. And like, I've had adult dogs for a while. It's pretty easy for me to monitor weight, but they're not growing, right?
yeah,
They're not
yeah.
growing dogs that have they have different needs for nutrition.
Yeah, yeah. So our puppies, right, as they're going to have a higher protein need because everything is growing, their skin, their muscles, their organs, all of that. They also, when we look at, especially, I mean, this is for any dog, but especially our sporting dogs who we need their brains and we need their vision developed in, tip-top condition. Having those omega-3 fatty acids, so DHA and EPA that come from fish oil. Puppies have, and kittens, I'll do a little shout out to our kittens. They have a higher requirement than adult dogs and cats do. So that's, again, why it's important to either make sure that it's for all listed as all life stages, or that you're feeding a puppy food to a puppy, because they do have those added nutrient requirements as everything is growing. The one thing also, for, if anybody, any of your listeners are, have those large breed dogs or large breed puppies, that's another place where it's really important to feed a large breed puppy food to puppies, to large breed puppies. Because it's kind of counterintuitive. A lot of times we think, okay, they're large breed dogs, so we should feed them exorbitant amount of calories. But we really want those large breed dogs to grow in a controlled manner. If they grow too fast, then a lot of times their skeleton grows faster than their muscles do, and that can predispose them to getting a lot of orthopedic or joint diseases and things like that. So we really want to make sure that that large breed puppy food is actually a little bit more calorie controlled than than an adult large breed food is, because we want those puppies to grow again at that nice, slow, controlled pace versus shooting up in weight too quickly.
Interesting. That just goes into the research, right? That just
Yep.
steps all the way back to how much research goes into all of these different like all of the different, not blends, we're not making wine, but formulas.
Yeah. I don't know. A glass of wine sounds pretty good right now.
Okay. This one might be, I know we've only got like 9 minutes left, but
Yeah.
we talked about like how to tell if your dog's weight is fine. Are there any good indicators of your dog not feeling well? I know like coughing or like sneezing and all that stuff, but like my dog itches its ears. My wife has a golden doodle, and
Okay.
it's prone to ear infections. And you can tell when it's starting to itch its ear, it's like, okay, clean that ear and keep an eye on it, right?
Yeah.
Today it started eating a lot of grass, and I'm like, okay, it's got a stomach issue right now. And is there stuff like that that's kind of stuff to look out for?
Yeah. Yeah. Little hacks or so. If I knew the answer to why dogs eat grass, I would be retired and have a beautiful private hunting land somewhere with a nice ranch, and not still working for Purina. Maybe doing some consulting on the side, because I have found my passion for sure. Yeah, it's one of those things, like eating grass is one of those, like, do they eat grass because they feel bad? Or when they eat the grass, does it make them feel bad? It's one of those things we're not, like, nobody really knows. Sometimes, like, I'll find this with Finn, my yellow lab, like in the springtime when that grass, like, that is just like so crispy and green, and he just, like, we'll be out for a run and he stops to eat some of that. My hypothesis on that is because he's thirsty, and like that just like is nice and refreshing for him. So that aspect I don't know. I mean, I do, really strongly encourage, is, not fun as this sounds, is look at what's coming out the backside. So dogs should have two 2 to 3 bowel movements a day. And it really should, if you're bored, you can go and Google the fecal score chart that pops up, but your dog's number 2 should really look like the number 2 on the fecal score chart. So it should look, without getting too gross, like a Tootsie Roll that comes out. And that really indicates that their digestive tract is functioning at the right level, and that the food that you're feeding is compatible with your dog's digestive tract, right? There's going to be, a lot of people think food allergies are super common. It's only in about 6 to 8% of our dogs are truly food allergic, but they can have some food intolerances, which just means, hey, it doesn't quite sit right in their GI tract, which I think is one of, that's one of the bonuses of having all the options that we do in the pet food industry is, like, if your dog does have a little bit of an intolerance or a sensitivity to something, there are a whole host of options that you can choose from. But they're very, again, only about 6 to 8% of our dogs are food allergic. And if they are food allergic, a lot of times what we see in conjunction with each other is they will get recurrent ear infections. And then they will also, have like 4 to 5 bowel movements a day that are not really well formed, that are not easy to pick up, that they don't look like Tootsie Rolls, and all of that. So that can be an indication that the food you're feeding them really just isn't doing the best it can for their specific GI tract. I think this is probably so overlooked, but so important in our sporting dogs, is their dental health. So, Brad, you've got your puppy. You need to have your hands all up in her mouth, like, Greta, flipping over Greta's ears, playing with her paws, making it normal to, be looking in her mouth, looking at her teeth, all of that from a regular, on the regular, because that'll make, selfishly, that makes my profession's job a lot easier when dogs are good at being poked and prodded and all of that. But then it
makes everyone's, right? Like, not only is it
right.
but it's if I have a broken nail in the field and I need to trim it. If porcupines need to be able to work in the mouth, right? Like all burrs in the ears,
clean their ears, they get an ear infection, you got to be able to clean their ears, all of that. So very important. So, and again, flipping their lip up and checking out their mouth. 70 to 80% of dogs over the age of 3 have some sort of dental disease. And so, they need their teeth, right? For us to be able to hold that bird in their mouths and bring it to us and all of that. So, really, looking in there, if their breath starts to change suddenly, that's another indication that either maybe they have a tooth root infection, maybe they have a broken tooth, or sometimes different diseases can change the way their breath smells. So diabetes can do that. Renal disease or kidney disease can make their breath change. So that's another, kind of thing. I know it's not all that exciting to get up in their grill and smell their dog breath, but again, gives you a good indication of what's happening outside of, what you can see in front of them, and could get you to the vet a little bit more quickly than if you ignore it.
Another good movie there, Jerry Maguire. My cat's breath smells like cat food.
I know we only have a couple minutes left, but while we're on this subject, quick, do you brush your dog's teeth?
I feel like we're in a safe space, so I can be honest. I do not. There's only, when you look at the research out there, only about 2% of dog owners brush their dog's teeth. But don't do as I do as I say. And really, so plaque turns to tartar in about somewhere in the neighborhood of about 48 to 72 hours. So if you can, and I'll do this again, this may be like a little hack or an insight into my bizarre life. But most dog owners know, like, you don't go to the bathroom by yourself anymore. Like, I go into the bathroom and both my dogs follow me in there. And I'm like, can I have a moment? No. Okay. Well, if you're in here with me, you're getting poked and prodded. So we I have a little stack of gauze that's right there by the side of the toilet, and I will take it and just rub it on the outside of their teeth while I'm in there. Takes literally maybe 20 seconds max, and that's just enough to like knock that plaque down. It's not going to take, once that plaque hardens into tartar, which is that brown stinky hard stuff that we see on the outsides of their teeth, you can't get that off. That has to be cleaned professionally by a veterinarian. But taking that gauze and rubbing that plaque off helps to at least slow it turning into tartar. In an ideal world, we would brush our dog's teeth every single day like we brush ours. But I know life, got to be realistic. So if you can do that, maybe that little gauze hack like every other day, that at least will help slow down that plaque turning into tartar, save them from some dental disease, save you from the hundreds, upwards of $1,000 it's going to cost to have teeth removed and all of that noise.
Good tips. Good tips. And I know we're on a time schedule here. Any last words or any way people can get in touch with you if they would have any questions in regards to this?
Yeah. I would say, again, phone number, look for that AFCO statement. Those are my two biggest takeaways for your listeners today. And then lastly, the body condition score, right? And if you can follow me at Pet Vet RuthAnn. And it's a new page that just recently launched, but it'll be all things dog and a little bit of cat related. And there'll be some good sporting dog stuff, content on there as well. Drop me a DM. I'd be happy to answer the questions that you got.
Awesome. And we will definitely throw that link in there in the show description when this airs, and we'll make sure it's promoted, and we'll tag the page and everything else so people can easily find it.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, this was great.
Very informative. It was exactly, wow, a lot. I'm going to have to go back and re-listen. I am.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for coming on. And until next time, everyone,
All right.
keep chasing that experience.